first. Okay, just a little bit of history. NCDEA is the Employees Association for all Conservation District employees across the country. We are a membership organization who is dedicated to growing and enhancing the experiences and knowledge of Conservation District employees. We do that through a couple of different methods. We sit at the national level on multiple policy and procedure groups to help drive conservation policy at the national level. We also are dedicated to providing training and outreach to employees across the country. This is one of those methods. We did a strategic plan last year, and one of the things that came up was really the need for more training for district employees to access. And so we have done a variety of different topics, all based on a needs assessment survey. You can still take, it's on the website. If you go there, you can let us know if there's something that you're really interested in hearing about. So we have done multiple things: education and outreach, social media best practices, funding sources that are kind of outside the box. And today we're talking about human resources. So kind of a high level human resources. You will notice that you can ask questions in the chat. There's a Q&A chat. So please feel free as people are talking. If you have a question, drop it in that Q&A box and we will attempt to get to all of them throughout our hour together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany. She's going to start us off today. And Tiffany, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am with CPS HR Consulting. I am a regional manager responsible for California and some neighboring states, and I am the client liaison for CPS. I have the pleasure of working with all of our public agencies throughout the state and in other states. Cities, counties, special districts. And CPS HR is if you're not familiar with us, we are a public agency just like you. We are a joint powers authority. Our charter only allows us to work with other public agencies. And we are actually a California Special Districts Association endorsed affiliate member. So anytime one of their members calls them for an HR need, they refer them to us. If you're going to be coming to the Special Districts Conference next month in Indio, please stop by and say hello. I will be there. And we have worked with over 2,700 government agencies just in the last 3 years. And our folks have had a career in public service like myself. I've spent 21 years in counties and cities. And so we understand the promise of public service and the vision and the reason why we exist for our members of our community and our taxpayers. And so our goal is to provide organizational performance and improve it for everybody that we work with. And just to give you an idea, we've worked with over 200 special districts, all kinds of special districts in California in the last 3 years. And just for the conservation districts, we have worked with over 19 of your agencies. So, some of those, there's a whole list of them, and I'd be happy to share that later. So, okay, next, thank you. So we, like you, report to a public board of directors. So this is a list of the agencies that sit on our board, and we are what we call a full service HR organization. So we do basically all things HR, and I will mention that we do everything from the teeny tiniest engagement from a $500 training session all the way up to a large organization with hundreds of employees and even thousands of employees. And so we basically do it all. Thank you. Next slide, please. There we go. So in talking with Sarah and Mandy, we thought it would be helpful to touch on those things that are important considerations in HR as far as best practices to be followed. And there are actual guidelines and recommendations that I'm going to share with you now. So the first one relates to your board. Make sure that they have ethics training and that staff is also trained both initially when somebody is onboarded and then annually as well. So it's important to keep ethics at the forefront because, again, we are entrusted with public dollars and how we spend them. And as many of you know, sometimes we work in a fishbowl and your community members are always paying attention and watching what we do and how money's being spent and how we serve our communities. And the next one is governance. So this is really around the idea of having up-to-date job descriptions, org charts, who is reporting to whom. And the job descriptions are really very important because a job description is really the foundation around scopes of work, reporting relationships, where authority begins and ends, that those things also roll into what kind of training an employee should get over their career, how you develop your employees long-term, which leads into retention and keeping your employees engaged, cross-training, succession planning for future job vacancies. It also leads into performance reviews and performance development around the type of feedback that you're giving an employee related to their job duties and their scope of work and how they're performing in their position. And there's also other areas as well that job descriptions play into, but job descriptions really are the foundation. And so you'll know that you're not alone if you do not have up-to-date job descriptions or even job descriptions that exist. Because I can tell you from experience, everybody's job descriptions are out of date, but I strongly encourage you to update those and make sure that your board is pushing that because it relates to things that can result in litigation around discrimination, around the Americans with Disability Act, and how we're accommodating people for jobs and so forth. So make sure your board is regularly evaluating salaries and benefit packages and that those comply with federal laws. If you have any federal contracts, you've got to make sure you're paying minimum wage. If you, the FLSA on whether somebody is paid hourly versus exempt just changed on July 1st. And so there's lots of things related to salary that need to be on track. And so make sure that those are being evaluated. Board policies on compensation, hiring, firing, background checks. Again, I've kind of touched on some of that. And as far as why that's important, related to litigation and also retention. I can tell you, after post-COVID, there was a lot of one-upmanship around, we're going to give a raise here and then your neighbors are giving raises and the dust has kind of settled. But last thing you want to do is not be paying fairly or competitively because that's almost become expected by employees at this point. An expectation that they're going to receive fair compensation. Training, make sure that your sexual harassment and discrimination prevention training is happening. Train your board and your supervisors biannually is what is suggested by the California Special Districts Association. Moving along. So general administration practices. So make sure that your managers are actually using those written procedures and policies around how they are administering the employment function within your organization. There's a lot of eyes on fairness, kind of a peaked heightened sense around fairness. And so if people are not getting their performance evaluated, if they're not getting their annual increases or probationary, entry level increases when they are told, people talk, and it can create problems. It can create bigger problems. And so leave management is huge. Make sure that people are accruing and using their leaves appropriately, and that they are getting paid on time, paid correctly, that those things are being accurately reported, and that they are aware of and using their benefits, because that will impact your organizational cost, of course. Employee job descriptions and duties defined, and let's see, district policies, procedures. Make sure you pick those up and dust them off, and make sure that they are complying at least from a legal aspect annually. Make sure that a lot of things are changing, especially in leave management. And you can't just look, you need to be looking at federal as well as state, and then also legislatively what's happening within your own counties, for example. So for example, I'll use minimum wage as an example. In LA County, they have a completely different minimum wage than the state and the feds. And so you just need to be aware of and up to date on all of those particulars. So policies and procedures, I can't tell you how important they are. They set expectations. They set expectations around what good performance is going to look like, what expectations are of your leadership, how to report things, how to prevent liability and hazards, how to instruct people to take and use their leaves, for example, how to work safely, really things that are important to employees and get to the heart of how your organization operates. And that's important because we're setting a tone and we're sending a message to the group around the fact that we care about them and we want them to know, how to function at work and how to be successful. Have written fraud reports and policies and procedures for your employees on how to report suspected fraud, and remind your employees periodically of the policies, and then record keeping policies and procedures. And I can tell you, there's all kinds of federal record requirements. You have to keep personnel records, for example, 7 years after termination, medical benefits, 6 years after the end of the plan year, I-9 forms, 3 years, hiring records, 2 years after you made a decision. And then, for payroll records, 3 years. I mean, there's all kinds of different records. And so if you're not managing your records, also I would encourage you, some of this stuff is available on the internet. So if you actually just Google federal record retention requirements, the list will come up. And at the very least, make sure you're accessing good information. I would encourage you not to go after what this attorney posts or that attorney posts, or maybe, some vendor that's trying to make a sale posts. Stick to your postings by federal agencies, state agencies, and attorneys are good if it's a credible attorney and they're an attorney that actually works in public service with public service agencies, because they're in the know, versus an attorney that's never dealt with a public agency. I don't want you to get bad information. So anyway, moving on. And then policies, your make sure your policies are board approved. It again sends a message to the the staff that these are priorities of everybody from top to bottom, meaning everybody's accountable. It also sends a message that resonates that these policies have teeth, they're enforceable, and they're how we manage our business. So code of conducts, ethics, conflicts of interest, make sure employees feel comfortable reporting conflicts of interest, and know who to go to, because you want it to be somebody that has the authority to actually take an action on it. And if it is truly a conflict of interest, to elevate it either to an attorney or somebody who's responsible for that particular area, so that investigations can be, conducted and those things don't get ignored. Employee handbooks, make sure you have one. Again, this is another area that's very outdated. A lot of people have not updated their handbooks. There's old references to old information and old laws. And again, you want to make sure your employees know how to, call out, how to request safety equipment, how to, what they can take leaves for. Farther down here, there's military leave, pregnancy, disability leave. There's laws, especially in California, around, taking time off for childcare or attending school events. And so there's all kinds of different leaves. But you want to make sure your employees understand them and understand what's available and are taking those. Policies around vehicles, driving records, background checks, just safety, safety in general, that they need to be, if they're in their own vehicle driving for work, they need to maintain insurance. If they're driving a agency vehicle, typically that's insured through the agency, but make sure that you are managing your assets and that you are keeping your employees informed of what the requirements are. IIPPs, those are injury illness prevention programs, plans. That's a requirement, especially in California, but also I believe there's some requirements under federal OSHA as well. Make sure you know that the Cal OSHA requirements, if you are in this space and your people are doing especially light industrial types of work, there are all kinds of requirements by Cal OSHA. You can go to the Cal OSHA website or the federal OSHA website, and they have sample policies on heat illness and requirements for personal protective equipment. And you should have an injury reporting procedure that is for both that works in conjunction with your workers' comp reporting process, so that employees are working safely, they're reporting their injuries, and that they are actually receiving treatment and care and able to return to work as quickly as possible. Drug-free and alcohol workplaces. If you have any federal contracts, you must have a drug-free workplace policy if you're receiving any federal funding. And so next slide, please. Okay, so I just threw a whole bunch at you, and I wanted to mention to you, so if you're a smaller agency and you're wearing 3 or 4 hats or more, who do you go to? How do you know what you're doing? How do you know you're doing the right thing? CPS HR, like I said, has worked with special districts for years. Our consultants can provide assistance in any area of HR. We've kind of seen and done a lot throughout our careers. We have support available through the phone, through email. Our people are fairly responsive, and they can be available to coach you through the toughest situations. So, that can touch on all the areas we just discussed. We can create onboarding programs for you and more. So next slide, please. So this is our model. We have two different models. We have an HR membership model and what we call an HR consulting services model. The models mostly, I can tell you, are performed remotely unless you need some on-site support. So for example, during open enrollment, if we were assisting you with open enrollment, our folks could come in and provide in-person assistance, and they could have employee meetings and so forth and so on. We try to match you with the right level. So if you don't need a manager, we're not going to charge you for a manager. If you need someone just to compile reports and send out some emails and so forth, we're going to give you somebody who's more at a technician level, because we're a nonprofit. We're not trying to profit off of our agencies. And so these are all the different areas that we can assist with. So again, full service agency. Next slide, please. So I'll talk first about our HR membership. We have our HR essentials level, our HR advisory level, and our strategic partnership level. So the HR essentials level is $1,950 a year. It is 12 hours, basically a bucket of hours that you receive. And it's great for just, you're not sure what your needs are going to be. You may or may not have an HR department. Sometimes we just need to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and get a consultation and make sure that, I call them sanity checks, just, hey, I need a sanity check. This is what's going on. This is, what I thought I would do. Am I on the right path, type of thing. And so that level is great for that. It is also great for one-off types of projects. So updating employee handbooks, reviewing a policy that's already in existence, talking through a new policy, quick employee relations types of issues, that kind of thing. Once the buckets exhaust for the hours, you can actually either move up to the next level or add additional buckets of 6 hours each. The HR advisory level is the same concept. It's more hours. And you can get an add-on, what we call an add-on with that. And I'll talk about add-ons in a second. And then the next level is 40 hours and basically 2 add-ons. And the beauty of the HR membership is it's really simple to register. You just go to this website, and I'm going to show it on the next slide as well. You just go to that website and you sign up directly. You can do it through a credit card. It's really straightforward. Next slide, please. So under all 3 levels of the HR membership, you get 1 point of contact, a dedicated HR person who, like I said, has worked in the public sector, a 1-hour free consultation on top of that. So it's actually a total of 13 hours, for example, for the first level. And you can use it at any point in the year. You don't have to use it all within a month. You don't have to use it every month. It's, again, just kind of there as you need it. But do be aware that the hours expire at the end of a year. So they're not, you can't push them forward into the new year. If you sign up for the HR membership, you get discounted rates in training, recruitment, and testing. So for example, there was the 40-hour bucket You know, that's great for us helping you do a recruitment, to do outreach, to create your recruiting brochure, those kinds of things. So that the add-ons you'll see at the bottom there fall under the HR advisor and strategic partner levels, just not that entry level. And it also gives you access to our toolkits and our checklists and sample policies, and it's really just a great value. And like I said, it's super inexpensive. So if that's something, you know, sometimes we don't know we need HR, sometimes we just need a resource, a good resource. You know, if you call an attorney, they're going to charge you $300 an hour or more. And so this is just a really good value. Next slide, please. Okay, then we have our HR consulting services. We call it insourcing or outsourcing. And so the why. You might not have an HR department. You might need to just have an extension of your existing HR. There's been a lot of vacancies. People have, you know, you get a vacancy, somebody retires or resigns. It's going to take, you know, at least a month to create your job posting and put that out there, float it for a couple weeks, and then get through your interviews and get somebody hired. And that's under ideal situations. So we've actually been filling in a lot for people, given this environment and all the movement that we're seeing. Also seasonal. So, you know, hey, I just need somebody during open enrollment, or hey, I just need somebody once a month to do some training, or somebody to look at our policies and update them, or gee whiz, you know, we just never get to updating our handbook. So it can be project, workload needs, all of those reasons. Again, the one point of contact, but the great thing about the one point of contact is, you know, you have your person, that's the person assigned to you, they're dedicated, but behind them, they have just an army of, we have over 110 project consultants that work with us and have expertise. So if it's a Affordable Care Act question, and your point of contact doesn't deal with that every day, they can reach back and speak to that expert on the ACA and answer any odd, unusual questions that you might have. The flexibility. So because we are assigning a dedicated point of contact to you, we need to kind of have an idea of how many hours you need on a weekly basis, monthly basis, annual basis, so that we can make sure that person is available to you during the hours you need. And again, that is typically virtual unless you actually need somebody to come in person. And again, you get the access to the templates and forms, and we do an annual legal update, and we share best practices. And the way that this model works is basically a professional services agreement. It's a time and materials only. You're only going to be billed for hours actually used. And it's based on, typically we will set a not to exceed amount. So that could be, you know, $5,000 or, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever your need is. But it's based on $140 an hour average. It's much more economical than the membership as far as when you break it back down into an hourly rate. And that is to cover our overhead, because we are a CalPERS agency. And so we do have very specific overhead costs, benefits, pension, that kind of thing. So we bill based on trying to cover our rate. Next screen, please. All right, so that was a lot. So thank you for your time. I believe we had some questions, so we'll
Yeah.
go.
We have a couple questions, Tiffany. So the first one is, related to salary comparison resources. If you know of anything out there that districts could use to, outside of a district doing it themselves and kind of reaching out to the surrounding areas, but to make sure that pay remains competitive within their area, their region, their state.
Yes, so there's certainly agencies like us that do salary studies. We've done multiple salary studies with special districts. So we're not the only ones. There's others as well. So you can always do a salary survey through a vendor. The other way to do salary surveys is to if you have the staff and the time to do it, is to go through Transparent California. They have everybody's salaries listed publicly. There is a tab for special districts, and it'll pull up a list of all the special districts in California that are reporting salaries, and you can pick out the ones that you know are your neighbors, and you can gather that information.
And
The
then
only thing,
Tiffany, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What about
yes.
what about nationally? What about outside of California? Is there anything that you can think of, like state agent associations, things like that?
There are some national surveys that where they publish nationally. I think Mercer does a national study. I believe Gallagher does a national study that they publish, and I believe Mercer, Gallagher, and I believe Korn Ferry might as well. That's going to be a blend. It's not going to be public sector specific. But there you can Google 2024 salary surveys, and it'll pull up what's out there and what's available. There's also your vendors like us will have national surveys that we subscribe to. So you could contract with us to just tap into that survey information that we have as well. And that can bench to both a blend of companies as well as nonprofits only, as well as public agencies only. So we have all kinds of ways to splice the data. And so, yeah.
Good. Thank you. Okay, how about this one? How do you change a job description when you hire someone under one description and things change, priorities change, etc., and now you want to make changes to that to reflect updates, new funding, different changes in operations, etc.?
Sure. So first of all, I caution you to look at your policy, see what your policies state your steps are and methodology to do that. And so if it is defined, if there are steps to accomplish that, make sure that you are following those steps so that you're not breaking your own policy. It comes down to doing a job analysis, and that always involves the employee's input into their job duties. It can be as simple as if it's a very small district, it can be as simple as handing somebody their job description and asking them to review it and asking them to add an attachment of additional job duties that are not reflected, anything that's not up to date in the job description. You want to make sure your employee feels like they have input and that they have a vested interest in the outcome of what their job description ends up looking like. And because you don't want to end up with a grievance or somebody feeling like they're not valued, or that they were discriminated against, or that you're doing something to them by updating their job description. There's all kinds of reasons to do that. So basically you have them review their job description, give input into a process to give input into the job description, and then the supervisor should review that, the job analysis that's completed. You also want to informal HR processes for job analysis. There's all kinds of factors that go into that, like, the percentage of time spent doing 4 or 5 major tasks, and you want to have those grouped nicely in buckets, and you want to determine level of authority and, to what extent they can encumber the agency into financial decisions or not. So there's actual factors that go into that kind of stuff. But you want your supervisor to review it. You want the supervisor to give their input, whether they agree or disagree. And then it continues to be modified until you get to an up-to-date job description. And then really at the end, you want to make sure the employee reads it. They sign off on it, that they're in agreement. And if they're not in agreement, they should state that as well, so that you have that well documented.
And then 2 quick ones before we let Mandy, because I want to make sure we have time for her. But so these 2 are kind of, if you have resources for definitions on some things. So like seasonal workers versus short term, and then tying that into leave, and then also hourly versus exempt, and kind of where can we find some resources on those? So and we can drop those in the chat too, if you have something that we could put in there.
So go to every state should have some sort of a wage and hour division website. In California, it's through the Department of Labor, and they have all of the legal definitions under FLSA for exempt versus non-exempt, for hourly, for temporary, and there's all kinds of wage and hour posters and resources, and even trainings that they offer free through their website to help educate you on the lay of the land, and so that you're not breaking rules. So wage and hour, FLSA, they're through the Department of Labor, there's a lot of resources on all of those subjects.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. Mandy, do you want to jump in? I'm going to put Mandy has some resources that she has put together. So I'm going to drop those in the chat for everyone. It's a link to a bunch of resources. So please reference those, use those, and Mandy, I'll let you get started.
Okay, let me just remember how to, there we go. Okay. We even practiced screen sharing and I forgot momentarily. There we go. Okay. All right. So thank you, Tiffany, for presenting. You did such a good job. I feel like she had some really great ideas at all levels in this kind of conservation district world. And when we do these workshops, it's always the challenge of, getting to everybody. And so a public agency provided HR service, it's kind of an interesting thing not many people know about, and because they're national, I knew Tiffany would have some great accessible resources. So I wanted to talk about my district's kind of foray into human resources. We did not have any help for a long time. We kind of cobbled together a human resources set of materials saved in all kinds of different places, and doing what Tiffany said, not to do Googling and, pulling things offline. And sometimes you have to do that. But as we added people, it became clear that we really did need a little bit more. I was hoping everybody on could maybe put just something into the chat, just so I kind of understand most of the people today. If you have a chance, would you consider yourself 1 through 4? You're high functioning HR, you have some HR support, you don't have HR, but you feel kind of good about it. You maybe have resources from colleagues, or, you're way too busy and you really can't spend a lot of time. If you get a chance to put that in the chat, maybe we can kind of see the majority of people here today. But while I'm waiting, I'm going to keep going. I don't really need to talk about that. So IERCD is a conservation district in Southern California, and we added people pretty rapidly beginning around 2017-18. We went from smaller to larger. We got a more supportive, I guess, state association of conservation districts who gave us access to some grant resources, and adding people really took us from this informal approach to HR to kind of needing to understand and be able to ask those questions, what Tiffany was talking about. When things come up, when employees are upset or they're going to be upset, how do you kind of manage the risk of having more people? It is a nice service to have. So we did a small contract. We went with a private person. He had his own business. He was a lot of fun. I don't think I ever met with him when he wasn't wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And I'm not kidding. He was really just kind of a fun person. Was flexible, was able to give us some nice attention based on our kind of smaller organization, based on some of the bigger public agencies out there. But as I came to find out later, he provided primarily nonprofit support, which is different than what we needed. And while he got us, really moving on kind of tightening up on employees and structure and that kind of side of HR, his biggest service that he did for us is go do an overall kind of HR audit, where he gave us this really terrifying list of everything you're supposed to have. Told us when he gave it to us, don't worry, most people don't have all these things, but really this is what you should be working towards. Having it in that list form, I think, helped us to understand, where do we really want to focus our time? Some things are big, questionable. If you've got unlimited money, you can do them. Other things are, you shouldn't be operating without these things. So that was very helpful. So while ultimately we didn't stay with him because nonprofit HR is different than government agency and public money HR, he really did. He was incredibly helpful. And this was one of his biggest helps. And so what I'm here to talk about, Tiffany gave you a great broad overview, levels of service, things like that. I'm put some resources in that drive for everybody. And I was just going to talk quickly about what those are and invite everybody, if they can help you, please download and use. But really, essentially, every district, should have these things. Standardized letters to employees, onboarding, offboarding, job descriptions, things that you've agreed upon and signed, so that everybody understands what everybody's role is of the district, and what everybody can expect coming on and leaving. And these are templates to be created and easily replicable. And I put a couple examples in that drive. An employee handbook, Tiffany talked about that really extensively. So I don't need to go over it a ton, but ours is in there. Feel free to take a look, to use whatever you would like to use, knowing that some of the things in there are California specific, but there's a lot in there I think would be able to be replicated in your own handbook. We also, everybody should have a complete personnel file in one place. It doesn't have to be you, it should be somebody. But if you have, more, especially if you have more than one employee, all of their core documents should be accessible to an approved group of people only in one location. And then finally, a process for formal, really, I guess, discipline and acknowledgement. So people doing well, people struggling. There's a process in our employee handbook, and making sure we follow up and properly document. If you don't do that, you could talk to somebody 20 times, but if you haven't written it down, gotten an acknowledgement, saved it, it's, what I learned the hard way, it's meaningless. For larger districts, if anyone's on today with more, more employees or more need, I also put some resources in. There's a PowerPoint on a staff structure, titles, and just kind of an org chart. And really, everybody feel free to use anything that you can. So if you don't have one of the action items today, and I put action item because you can take our version, modify it for yourself and use it. And you might be on the call thinking, what kind of a moron doesn't have an offer letter? We didn't do this for a long time. We did a lot of verbal, we did emails. Now we have it's a straight up full-time offer letter, part-time offer letter, seasonal offer letter, just has template language. And we change out the titles, the name of the employee, we attach their job description, and then we have a place for a signature. And in that offer letter, it's very clear. What day are they starting? When did they get their benefits? What are they eligible for? So you don't have anybody saying, oh, my manager told me I would come on and get $1,000 a month, cell phone stipend, or that's silly, but whatever they think they were told, it's there and they signed it. And then it goes in their well-organized personnel file that I think I'm still working on. And then just other letters. There's in that drive also, there's an offboarding letter. When people leave, just detailing exactly what they're getting, what is their last day, what can they expect? Everybody signs it, everybody gets a copy of it, it's done. And then to the extent that you can do it, we write resignation letters we give them a template to use so that it's simple and it's clear. And all of this is just, as I know everybody on the call knows, but to say it again, just risk management. So no one can say later, I didn't understand, it wasn't clear. Just not forcing anyone to sign it, just agreeing on terms, getting that written up, and then asking everybody to execute. For the employee handbook, when I started, we had a 300-page plus district handbook with everything under the sun, and it becomes unusable. Ours that I put in there, I think is about 50 pages, and it has employee-only policies. Review it, send me an email, use it. I'm on the NCDEA website. I'm the member at large and also the Pacific Region rep. So if you go on our website to fill out a survey for today, look for next workshop, take our employee survey, you can find my email. If you have questions, I'd love to sit down and talk with you. But just whatever you would like to use, with the caveat that it's a California district's policy manual. The one thing I could provide people, if you don't already do it, get a signature that they had time to review it every year, file that signature in their well-organized personnel file. Tiffany talked about safety. I'm not going to go on and on about it. If you have people working outside and you don't have anything for that, we have a ton of stuff. I would love to provide it for you. Our big concern is heat. We have very specific heat guidance. There's other weather in the rest of the country that you might need, but anybody that needs things like that, we have informal trainings and a formal acknowledgement. They understand what to do in certain temperatures. We already talked about personnel files. This is a giant pain. Everybody's so busy. Who has time to sit and organize? We have a key person at our office who helps with these. She's the only one with access. She helps keep them current. It's really nice to be able to go in and grab something or add things to it. Just a good use of your time as you kind of try to carve out a little bit for administrative stuff every week. The other kind of big thing, and there's examples in the drive, is documentation. No matter how many, if you have one half-time employee you manage, if you have 10 people, if you're not documenting, you need to make sure you're doing that. You can email, if they're 5 minutes late, you don't need to write them up and prepare to fire them. But for anybody who is habitually, breaking rules for a lot of reasons, morale of other employees, just making sure that people understand the requirements, and but really more than anything, that if they really become hugely problematic, that you're able to show you gave multiple opportunities, you educated them, you tried to engage with them, they continue to break rules. It's a nice option if you do have to take action. Hopefully you don't have to, but you can. There's also a copy of our annual review and goals. What I like about ours is it's got review questions, and then it has an assigned number. In our district, the manager and the employee both review the employee, and then they meet and they talk about their individual review, and where the numbers are off, that's further discussed. And we figure out why, and action items are created from that. And if you're assigning someone a 1, it's real clear why. It's not as subjective, I think, as other things I've seen. I'm not going to waste time on this. This is in the drive that I gave you. And then just finally, lessons learned. Know your provider. Make sure that person knows your organization. I can't stress that enough. I went into this not understanding that. They don't get that you're a government. They don't understand the specific requirements. You're going to have a problem. Figure out what it is that they're doing. We kind of had our guy run wild with an employee who wanted to update his job description. And before I knew it, they'd spent 10 hours editing this thing. It made me crazy. It's because I really hadn't set limits for employees and for him. And then, really overall, this was a big benefit. If you can find funding, I'm encouraging people to put it into your cost recovery rate, but try to find even just the most basic amount so you can get help where you need it. It was a great experience and we have benefited from it. If you can use anything I provided today, please do. I welcome it and also welcome questions today or afterwards.
That was awesome, Mandy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lots of folks just commenting on what their kind of level of HR is, but we did have one who would love to see a copy of your safety policy if you're willing to share that. Is that in the Google Drive? Because
I don't think it is. I was really nerding out yesterday and I was like, I don't know how much to put in here that people need. But I would love to put it in. And the great part is we had a person who was in leadership that was not taking breaks. And when you're in leadership, it just puts your organization at risk. Other people feel compelled to also not take breaks and not to whine, but we get like triple digit heat really all summer in the desert where I live. It's not anyone who's in San Diego for NACD is not like that here. It's very hot. So it's nice to have very clear guidance. And if someone chooses to break the guidance, you have a really easy way to talk to them and say, here's your signature where you understood that this is the requirement. And really heat injury, and they can come on so quickly that it's just nice to have it. It's a pain to write out, but once you're done, it just kind of needs to be, I think Tiffany called it being glanced at every year. Just look at it,
Well, Chris says they don't have so much heat, but blizzards, grizzly bears, and rattlesnakes. So you have to amend Mandy's policy.
Hey, we also have rattlesnakes. We also have that. But yeah, that's a great when people shouldn't work, when they should work, what they should have in the car. Who has the time to put all that together? I love getting resources from other employees. That I'm sure ours is a template we got from somebody. And it's really nice to start with someone who also does a similar job to you, probably has learned some difficult lessons. So what you're getting is an example of like where they went wrong, corrected, and everybody is welcome to it. I'll put it in that drive.
Nice. And we'll figure out how what's in there and if we can get that somehow on the website or link to it too. So if folks don't have the chat or haven't saved that link, we'll figure that out for you. One other question, Mandy, can you talk about setting limits? And does that mean limits on time on certain projects? I'm not sure.
It's really about access to HR. One of the things we had an issue, an employee who became very upset about something and left, and when in her exit interview, which is just a lame photocopied thing I pulled offline that we do now, is a good idea just to cover yourself when they leave. She did mention that as one of the reasons she left. And so I wanted employees to have access to HR, but I should have talked with HR, our rep right at the beginning and said, anything over a certain amount of time, like you and I should check in, because that job description that he worked on with that guy, I mean, it was hours of meeting and discussion and revisions that I was like, what are you talking? What? Like we, have it now. The job description is 5 pages long and has things like fill out timesheets. It made me crazy. And I'm making him sound terrible. I think he was trying to get the employee more engaged and have him feel a sense of like power, maybe a little bit like engagement, but just, I think talking to your HR person and checking in regularly to say, we don't have a lot of time. We have to put limits on what people can access you for. What I would say. Oh, Sarah, I think you might be muted.
Shoot.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
doing so
I can hear
good.
you.
Dang it. Any last questions that anyone has? If not, Tiffany, Mandy, thank you so much. We very much appreciate your time today. We will put up some different resources. I see Tiffany sent me a link for the federal wages and FLSA. So we'll make sure and we put that stuff when we upload the recording. We'll put that on the website or we'll link to it. So there's a whole bunch of resources there for folks who maybe aren't live and can't access it today. So thank you so much. I would encourage you, you'll get a survey. Please fill that out about what you thought today, if there's any topics you really want to hear. And our webinar next month is on September 25th. And we have a couple of presenters coming in to talk about selling the urban conservation message in rural areas. So kind of a little different approach to some education and outreach. So again, thank you, Tiffany and Mandy. We appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.